Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started, and I will just allow people in as the webinar goes on. Wanted to thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Ann Risso, and I am the Community Relations Coordinator for Douglas County School District. I wanted to thank Skyridge Medical Center. They are our partner, and their programming and support helps provide this monthly parent university engagement for our Douglas County School District parents. During tonight's webinar, we will have a presentation by Deputy Sean Heidman, and he is going to be presenting online safety with Y.E.S.S, creating a culture of digital safety. And after this webinar is finished, we will be recording it and providing the recording on our website. So I'd like to go ahead and introduce Deputy Sean Heidman.
All right, thank you, Ann. Hi, everyone. Pleasure to virtually see you here. So I am Deputy Heidman with Douglas County Sheriff's Office. Some of you might know me through your kids as Officer Sean or Deputy Sean. I teach our Y.E.S.S program. I've been doing this for 6 years. I've been with the Sheriff's Office for 8 years, and 6 of those years I've been teaching in our schools in this safety curriculum. And as you can see on the screen, it stands for Youth Education and Safety in Schools. We cover a lot of topics, mainly into 3 categories. We talk to them about relationships, we talk to them about digital culture, and we talk to them about substance use. So tonight's topic is going to be the digital portion, online safety. And this is near and dear to my heart. I think it's really important for kids to understand what they're getting into when they're working with social media, smartphones, that sort of thing. And as you know, these things don't come with instruction manuals. So that's kind of where I fill in the blanks for them to teach them how to be safe with their devices. As I said, I've been doing this for 6 years. We reach primarily 6th through 8th graders. I teach three classes total to 6th graders, 1 on each of those topics I just mentioned. And then the 7th and 8th graders get a total of 6 lessons with me each year. We do 2 on each of those topics. So the Y.E.S.S program has been with Douglas County School District for over 10 years. We actually started it right here in Douglas County. One of our former deputies was a school teacher before he became a deputy. He was also the DARE Officer of the Year at one point, and the sheriff at the time said, "Hey, we need something better than DARE. What can you do for us?" So he built this whole Y.E.S.S curriculum that we use today, and it's just grown and become better and better, in my opinion, each year. So it's a really good program. So without further ado, I'm going to get into the topic itself, the digital culture. And I'd like to start just by talking to you about how we got to where we are and why our kids seem so tied to these devices. Honestly, why we seem so tied to these devices. And there's a lot of science, there's a lot of neurobiology behind this stuff. So Professor Robert Sapolsky from Stanford University wrote The Magic of Maybe. And what he talked about was how we have this chemical, as you probably know, called dopamine in our brain. It's a neurotransmitter. And when something good happens, dopamine shoots off. It's like a reward for us. So when we are rewarded 100% of the time as expected, we get a little shot of dopamine. It's a small sense of pleasure. But what research has told us is if we're only rewarded about 50% of the time when we expect that 100% reward, when we finally do get the reward, it can be up to 400% stronger. The dopamine can be up to 400% stronger in our brain. So rather than this nice little feeling of, ooh, that's nice, it's a huge explosion of dopamine in our brain. Honestly, close to cocaine as far as the rush that you get from that. So as you can imagine, once you experience that once, you'll want more of it, right? And that's what creates that addiction. Well, the tech companies got wind of this. They understood this research and they said, hey, let's use this. We can really do well if we build this into our technology. We're going to make a killing off of it. And that's exactly what they did with our devices. A lot of times they regulate our feeds. They extend, delay response times, what we see. I mean, there's a lot going on behind the scenes with these algorithms, this artificial intelligence that kind of controls this stuff. And unfortunately, what it creates is addicts out of all of us, our children included. So if you wonder why your kid feels like they can't survive without their phone, it's not necessarily a personal weakness. This is built into the technology that we use to keep us coming back for more. So what it really comes down to is this stuff is built to capture data. Okay. It's addictive, like we just said. And it can also alter our behavior in some ways because we become so dependent on it. They can start to steer us a little bit here and there. And as you can imagine, kids are already very impressionable. So it's even easier to do that with our children, with teenagers especially. The way it works really is they've got built-in sensors, as you know, in most of our technology these days. I mean, heck, I can't even find a good television anymore that doesn't have the smart capabilities built into it, where you can talk to it, and sometimes cameras, things like that. It's just built into most of our tech. And what that means is they can really watch where we go through our location settings, what we buy, who we meet. Heck, they even monitor our steps through our little pedometers, right? And if you think about it, when was the last time you really needed to know how many steps you took in a day to know if you're healthy or not? Honestly, but that's what they have us think, that we need this technology just to be healthy people, that we need it to survive. And what happens is, as they study us, as they study our children, they collect behavioral residue. Everything that we're doing on our devices day in, day out, they're collecting that data, and they can use that data to learn more about us. And again, a lot of this is algorithms. It's not necessarily people sitting behind screens doing this all day long. It's artificial intelligence. And it's programmed to not only learn about us, but then to adapt based on what it's learning and create stronger versions of itself with that new data. So it's eventually it can exploit weaknesses. It can start to, like I said, steer us to make certain choices and things like that. And one of the things that's always gotten me, you see this little guy on the screen, our friends Alexa and Siri. They're great, they're convenient, I understand that, but at what cost? It's really at the cost of our privacy. There's a story from years ago I'll never forget it. It's the reason I don't have these in my own home, where a couple was sitting in their home in Oregon, and they were having a private conversation kind of thing, you probably don't talk to other people about. So they're having a private conversation, and they had one of these sitting in their home. They claimed it was turned off, but it turned itself on. It listened to their conversation, it recorded their conversation, and then it actually sent an audio file of that full recording to one of her random email contacts in her email list. So this guy contacted her after he listened to that and said, I don't know what's going on, but turn everything off in your house. Seriously, something's listening to you right now. And I just heard a conversation of you and your husband that I really didn't want to hear. So I share that story with the kids, and I say, hey, more power to you. If you want to have those in your house, that's up to you and your family, but that's enough for me to say no thanks. And I take it a step further. I have a personal phone and a work phone. They make me carry a work phone around, one of the perks to my job, I guess. And the first thing I did when I got both of those phones was I turned off the assistants. I turned off Google Assistant on my personal phone. I turned off Siri on my work phone because, as you know, they're always listening, right? And the kids always tell me stories how they're having a random conversation with their friends, their phones in their pocket. And then guess what? For the next few days, they start getting ads for whatever they were talking about. So I let them know you can protect yourself. You can make it harder for these companies to collect that data, but you got to be vigilant about it. You've got to turn those things off, turn off those settings, because no surprise, when you get your phone, it's going to be set with all that on, right? Because that makes it easier for them to collect that data. So that's kind of where we are. Just a background of why we're so addicted to our devices, and obviously how that can impact our kids as well when they get addicted to those devices. So now I just have a little quote I like to share with you. This is one of my favorite presidential quotes. You can see him right there, Abraham Lincoln, on the screen. And what he said that always struck me is the trouble with quotes on the internet is that you can never know if they're genuine. You probably all remember that, right? I think it was a Gettysburg Address or Emancipation Proclamation, one of those, right? Obviously, this is fake, right? But you'd be surprised how many kids look at this and don't get it right away. And that goes to show you where we are as a culture today with kids' ability to discern fact from fiction online. There was a study years ago that Stanford University did on just that subject, how well kids could tell what's real and what's not real online. And they said after that study, they could sum up the results in one word, and the word is bleak. B-L-E-A-K, bleak. Pretty sad, right? We're at a pretty sad state right now. So one of the other things we talk about in the Y.E.S.S lessons with digital culture is how to tell fact from fiction, because that's so important, and not to just take everything as fact because it happens to be on the internet. The CRAP test is a great start. I know it sounds a little gross, but it actually talks about currency, reliability, authority, and purpose. So those are the questions you want to ask, that our kids want to ask when they're online. Is this current? Is it a reliable source? Who is the author behind this? And what is the purpose of what they're sharing? Harvard Business Review a while back actually stated false news travels farther, faster, and deeper than the real stuff. And honestly, that's really not a surprise to us, right? But we need to instill that in our kids as well. We need to teach our kids not everything is as it seems when it's online. Here's another great example I use. I actually show them this. I show them body camera footage. And then I ask them to look at the details of what they're about to see and see if they can tell from those limited details what is going on in this footage. And I tell them it's grainy, there's no sound, you're going to have to rely on your eyes for this, and it moves really quickly. It's really herky-jerky movement, but I usually get the same answer from kids. And I also explain this is not my body camera, okay? This is somebody else wearing a body camera. So I'll go ahead and show you that footage and see if you can hone in on the little details that they usually catch. All right, so considering this is not a classroom setting, we're not live and everything, I'm not going to ask you all to shout out answers or anything, but that's usually what I do. And they typically tell me, okay, there's a guy in a red shirt. Number one, right? You see the guy in the red shirt right there with his fist in the camera. What's the guy doing? Usually they'll say, well, he's fighting the officer. Makes sense from what we saw, all that movement, right? All that shakiness. What's in the background? Usually they notice it's a parking garage. So at that point, I give them credit and I tell them, good job. You're picking up on the details, just like we talked about. Looks like you're on the right track here. Would everyone agree then? We got a guy in a red shirt in a parking garage fighting an officer, and just about everyone says, oh yeah, definitely. Sometimes I even ask, did you happen to see his face? And usually what I'll get from the kids is, he looked really angry. Yeah, I saw him. I saw his teeth. He was snarling at him, or he looked like, like he wanted to fight him. And that makes sense. That's probably what a lot of you saw too, if you thought you saw his face at all. But what that really is our brain trying to fill in the blanks based on the limited information that we have. So then I ask them the question, based on what you just saw, was the officer very threatened, moderately threatened, or not threatened at all? And almost unanimously, I get either very threatened or moderately threatened. Usually the majority of class will say moderately threatened, and then there's a good chunk of them that also say very threatened. It's super, super rare that I get the not threatened answer to this one. And based on what we just saw, that also makes sense, right? Then I explained to them how things are not always what they seem, especially when you find them online. Turns out this was not an officer wearing the body camera. It was actually a news reporter who got permission to borrow a body camera for a story. And the story he wanted to put out there was to show the public how easily we can be deceived. And in order to do that, what he did was he wore the body camera. He got his friend, the guy here in the red shirt, to come out to a parking garage with him. And I'll show you what was actually going on from another camera angle. So you're going to see the reporter on the left, his friend on the right. And believe it or not, that's the actual footage that we all just watched. So after he showed this to the public, he put out that same question. Was the officer very threatened, moderately threatened, or not threatened at all? And most adults who watched this said he was very threatened. So it's not just kids who have to worry about this. Adults need to be really, really careful about what they're taking in as well. We need to be smart consumers of the information that we're taking in, especially online. So that's just another example of that for the kids. And then one last example right here. I like to point out that not only is this confusing fact from fiction, but it can also really, really screw with our heads, especially when it comes to things like self-perception and self-esteem and that sort of thing. a great example of that. You're going to see footage of a model for an ad start to finish. So at first, you see the model in the photo shoot. Just minor touch up. This is where the real touch up begins. And we talk about this quite a bit in class, how these days it's harder and harder to feel okay just being us, to be yourself, because we're bombarded with this imagery of perfection constantly through social media, right? So I like the kids to be able to recognize that, and they do. They catch on to this pretty quickly, and I just tell them, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you're in this position, that we put you in this position on behalf of my generation, because I never had to worry about this. I had plenty of insecurities growing up. I was a really shy kid, and there were plenty of days where I didn't feel good about myself. But the last thing I ever had to worry about was social media telling me I'm never good enough. And unfortunately, because it's become this joke of everybody just filters everything and puts out a better than version of themselves, we recognize it, we realize it, but in the back of our head, we still wonder, well, why can't I be that cool? Why can't I be that beautiful? Why can't I be that perfect? And it really takes a toll on our kids. So now what I want to do is just take a few minutes, take a breath, because I've been talking really fast. I apologize. I got a lot of stuff I want to cover, so that's why I'm talking so fast. I just want to make sure you're able to get the most out of this tonight. I want to take a few minutes to talk about some of the problematic behaviors that we see, some of the things that kids get into that they shouldn't be, and potentially even get into legal trouble with us, or worse, get really hurt because of what they're doing. So one of the first things, I'm sure you all knew this was coming, cyberbullying. Cyberbullying is a continual problem for us. I talk about it every year. I've been doing this for a long time, and no surprise, it hasn't magically gone away, right? We still see kids cyberbullying. It happens for a number of reasons. This is one of those topics I like them to tell me why kids cyberbully. And usually the first answer I get is anonymity. They do it because they think they're anonymous. They think nobody knows who they are. So one, they're not going to get in trouble, or so they think. Two, the victim can't retaliate against them. You know, if you say something to somebody's face in the hallway, they can punch you if they don't like what you said. But if you do it through a screen, there's nothing they can really do in retaliation. And three, they get to maintain that pristine image of nice guy or nice girl at the school. And then they go home and turn into that closet troll where they just tear people apart. Another big reason that kids in particular cyberbully is because they really don't realize how bad it is. When they say terrible things to somebody's face and somebody cries, they have to face the fact that they hurt that kid. And, you know, even if they're a big bully, they still have empathy. They still know deep down that that was wrong, and they don't feel right about it. They feel guilt. But kids don't want to have to deal with that guilt. So they do it behind a screen instead, where, you know, now they don't see the emotional reaction. They don't see the facial expressions. They don't see the pain that they're causing. So they poke and they poke and they poke and they take it too far, not really realizing how much damage they're doing. So one of the big things that we hit on is the fact that it hurts just as much through a screen as it does face to face. Words are the same. It's just a different delivery system, but you're causing just as much pain. And kids need to hear that, because a lot of them have taken to hiding behind a screen and saying terrible things that they never dream of saying face to face. Like, for example, kill yourself. How many of us grew up with kids coming up to us and saying, kill yourself? I don't know, maybe I was just lucky, but I can't remember one time where another kid said that to me. They've even made an acronym for it, Y.E.S.S, for kill yourself. And this is the kind of stuff you see online way too often, because they're just desensitized. They're desensitized to the words and what's really being said, and they think it's not a big deal. So we like to talk about the consequences, not just how it hurts the victim, but it really hurts the bully. because they're not as anonymous as they think they are. And if it becomes a criminal investigation, we will catch them. And I explained to them, I'm no computer expert. I'm not a computer genius. I'm not going to pretend to be, but I've got people that I work with who are, and I can have them help me and find these kids. Once we find them and once they're convicted, they can actually face up to 6 months in jail for cyberbullying. And on top of that, up to $750 in fines. Those are some real consequences. So they need to understand this is going to change your life. It's just not worth it. You're not just hurting the victim, you're hurting yourself as well. And the reason we created that law, as you see here on the screen, it's called Kiana's Law. We had a girl in high school in one of our Douglas County schools here years ago, Kiana Arellano, who was a popular student. She was a cheerleader. She did really well in school. Everybody loved her. But I shouldn't say everybody. There were a select few girls who got jealous of her and decided to start cyberbullying her. And it became so incessant and so nasty that poor Kiana, rather than reaching out for help, she tried to just handle it all on her own and keep it a secret. And eventually she tried to take her own life. Her dad was able to find her before she had fully passed away, but she had been without oxygen to her brain for so long that she's now in a wheelchair. She can't speak. She can't move. She's just set in a wheelchair with a computer screen in front of her that speaks for her. So her eyes can move and she can look at different icons and words on the screen, and the computer communicates for her, all because some kids thought it would be fun to cyberbully her. So that's where Kiana's Law came from. We named that in honor of her, and it's actually part of our harassment law. So harassment, if you're not familiar here in Colorado, is a misdemeanor crime, and it basically says you have an intent to harass, annoy, or alarm another person. And in doing so, it can be verbal, it can be through a digital device like cyberbullying, it can be physical, like pushing, shoving, kicking, that sort of thing. Harassment entails a lot of different things, but there's a special subsection of that law that specifically deals with cyberbullying, and that's what we call Kiana's Law. Then we also talk quite a bit about sexting, which kids know is nudes. So if you hear your kids talking about nudes, N-U-D-E-S or N-U-D-E-Z, what they're talking about is sexting. And as we all know, sexting is images, right? It's not the words. It's not, now the words can fall under harassment or some other crimes. You know, if there's typing out in a text, I want to do this and that to you, but the words are not the sexting piece. Sexting is sending, receiving, possessing, or asking for any nude photos or videos of someone under 18. And the reason it's illegal for under 18 is because that's considered child pornography. Now, it used to be a felony charge for someone to sext when they were under 18. As a lot of you probably agree, I certainly agree, that's quite a big charge for someone sending a nude picture to their boyfriend or girlfriend, right? I don't think felony really fits with that. So after years of working with our court system, we were able to get that bumped down, but it is still a crime. And I'm not going to get into the details of it because it's honestly so convoluted. This person sent it to this person at this age and that age. It's a mess, but I will tell you it is illegal. What I do want to focus on is the fact that sexting rarely ends with sexting. What usually happens is it ends up in the wrong hands. Maybe it's the person they sent it to. Maybe it's that person's friend because they bragged to their friend and showed it to a few friends. Maybe it's someone else further down the road. But the fact is this stuff spreads like wildfire, and all it takes is one image. All it takes is one picture, one video, and it can destroy a kid's life. Because once it gets into the wrong hands, we get into sextortion. Sextortion is where that person blackmails the sender. They blackmail the person that the image is of, and they say, now I got you. I've got this picture of you, or I've got this video of you. You better give me exactly what I want and do exactly as I say, or I'm going to send this to all of your friends. I'm going to send it to your parents, your sports team, your church. Heck, I'll just post it all over the internet for everyone to see. And as you can imagine, if you're a teenager and someone's threatening you like that, you're panicked, right? The last thing you want is for that to get out to the world. So unfortunately, sometimes kids give these people what they want because they feel like they have no choice. So we talk about the alternative. We talk about the necessity of reporting this kind of thing, reporting these people so we can catch them and put them behind bars where they belong. And I also talked to him about the fact, yeah, you broke a law technically by sending that in the first place, but the last thing I see you as is a criminal. All right. When you bring this to me, you're a victim in my eyes, and my job is to protect you. So please don't hesitate to report this kind of thing, because when they don't report it and they give these monsters what they want, that's when we get down to the next step, which is called human trafficking. And we all know what that is. It's essentially child prostitution, where they force kids to have sex with pedophiles and they make money off of them over and over and over. So that's the modern day predator. Back in the day when we were growing up, we always heard about the horror stories of, the creep pulling up in the van at the park and opening the rusty van door and saying, "Hey kid, I got some candy for you." That's super rare. That hardly ever happens. What we see predators doing is meeting kids online. And in order to do that, they have to pretend to be somebody that they're not. So they don't show them their own picture as their profile pic. They pull a picture of a kid off the internet, similar age, usually an attractive kid, boy, girl, doesn't matter, whatever they think is going to attract this particular kid. And they pretend to be that kid. They build a whole profile around them. And they will create similar interests with your child. They will pretend to like the things that your child likes. So that way your kid thinks, wow, finally somebody understands me. It's been a long time since I felt understood. We just get each other. We have something special, right? They will try to take your child's side. So if you're constantly punishing your child for good reason, obviously, right? Your predator here is going to say, "Yeah, my parents are always busting me too, and I'm just sick of it. It's not worth it. They don't treat me right. They don't even treat me like a human being. In fact, I think I'd be better off just getting out of there, running away. Maybe we could run away together. Maybe we could meet up, right? I think we should run away. We'd be so much better off, and we could take care of each other." That's the kind of poison that they put in your kid's head. And in doing that, they isolate your child from the people who truly care about them, from us, from the parents, from their friends. They try to isolate them and pull them away from everyone else, so your child is more dependent on them. And in doing that, they get your child to tell them things they wouldn't tell other people, to tell them their secrets. And once they've told them their secrets, just like those nudes we talked about earlier, they can use that against them to blackmail them. They can tell them, "Now that I have your secret, you do what I say or else." And I know a lot of you are listening to this thinking, well, that's absolutely terrible. But I mean, we live in Douglas County. We don't need to worry about that, right? Wrong. So take a look at this. The biggest child sex trafficking sentencing in U.S. history, just north of our border right here in Arapahoe County. Some of you might live in Arapahoe County. Back in 2017, not that long ago, just 5 years ago, Brock Franklin, as you can see right here, and all of his friends, Brock was sentenced to 400 years. It started with a larger sentence, and then it was bumped down to 400 years, which I'm pretty sure he's going to be in there for a long time, right? Now, obviously, he's not going to live that long, but they just wanted to send a message. You're never going to see the light of day. You're going to rot in that prison cell for the rest of your life. Longest sentence in U.S. history. So if you think it's just happening somewhere else in some other big city or state, think again, because that's right here, right? They use Facebook a lot to recruit kids, and then they sold them through a website called Backpage, which was basically a child prostitution webpage that eventually got shut down. If you need something a little more recent, just a couple years ago, 2 years ago to the dot, 2020, right here in Douglas County in our own backyard, Chauncey Price was sentenced to 304 years for leading a human trafficking and child sex trafficking ring. One of his victims actually said, "I came forward to save others from him. He exploited young girls, controlled them, and manipulated them. He will continue to do that if he ever gets out." So you need to understand these monsters are among us, okay? And we need to keep our kids safe. One of the biggest things your kids can do, those who have social media, is adjust their privacy settings. If they haven't done that yet, walk them through it, teach them how to do it. We talk about it in class all the time. They have to set that to private, because when they leave it on public or everyone or whatever that particular platform calls it, these monsters can watch their every move. And a lot of their followers are probably predators as well. When they have unknown followers that they let just track them on social media, I understand why they do it. They want to boost their numbers. They want to look really popular, so they get all these unknown followers. But the problem is that's how these predators work. They secretly follow them and learn all about them, learn their habits, learn where they go, learn who they hang out with. And then by the time they start a conversation with them, they already know the answers half the time. They're just seeing if your kid's going to bite, if your kid's going to take the bait and actually converse with them. So I would say that is our biggest obstacle today with online safety, is just so many of these monsters out there. They know what they're doing. They're very sophisticated. We've arrested people before who are literally rocket scientists, child predators. These are smart folks. And I always explain to the kids, you're not going to outsmart them, so don't even try. The last thing you want to do is try to beat them at their own game. What you need to do is report it to us so we can do our job and get these people locked up where they deserve to be. So this is just an example of another thing I do in one of our classes. I like to have them at the beginning of class. I say, I need you to get out a pen, a pencil, and a piece of paper. It can just be a little sticky note. It doesn't need to be a full piece of paper, but have those out and ready. And then partway through class, I ask them to draw a smartphone with their pen. Real simple. And I tell the kids, if you're artistically challenged, not a big deal, draw a rectangle, right? It's not that hard to do. So they draw their little smartphone. It's funny to see how creative they get with some of them drawing little apps and stuff. I take about a minute or two for that. And then I tell them, okay, go ahead and put that aside. We're gonna come back to that later. So we talk about some more stuff. We usually get into sexting and cyberbullying and that stuff at this point. And then later in class, I will ask them to go ahead and pick up their pencil and erase that drawing that they did. And a lot of times the kids look at me kind of goofy, and usually that one or two will just shout out, well, you told us to do it in pen. We can't erase it. And I say, what are you talking about? Just do what I said. We got to move on. We don't have time for this. Okay. Erase it real quickly and then we'll move on. And we'll talk about something else. And you always have a few kids who are just frantically trying to erase. They're like, it's not working, right? The eraser dust is going everywhere. And then we talk about the connection. We talked to them about the fact you can't erase it, can you? It's the same thing with your digital media. The second you hit send, it's out there forever. There's no erasing it. I don't care if it's Snapchat. I don't care if it's one of those disappearing apps. That's not true. That stuff sticks around in the servers. And if you're a decent hacker, you can get a hold of those images. There are ways to do that. Or how about this? I've got my phone here, right? If I don't want to screenshot it, because if I screenshot it, it'll tell you that I did a screenshot. I want to be sneakier than that. What could I do? And it's amazing to see how quickly the kids say, well, you could use another device. Boom, just like that. My other phone. Now, kids don't have two phones, right? But they have friends. Do their friends have phones? Usually. So if they're over at a friend's house and somebody sends an image, all they have to do is say, hey, give me your phone real quick. Now they've got it forever. Or maybe they got their nice camera sitting on their desk because they were doing some editing from their photography class. They pick up their camera, they take a picture, now they've got it forever. So I like kids to understand there's no such thing as disappearing. It's not that simple. And once it's out there forever, and people can do whatever the heck they want with it. Along the same lines, we talk about their digital footprint and how important it is to take care of that footprint. I straight up tell them, look, when I was growing up, I didn't have to worry about that. I'm fortunate. I'm grateful that I didn't have to worry about that because I did some stupid stuff as a kid, just like most kids, right? And I was a pretty good kid, but every once in a while I did some things that I'm not proud of. The last thing I ever have to worry about, the same as you all, is having somebody post that for eternity on the internet. And yet our children have to worry about that every day. Every choice that they make could be memorialized just forever, put out there, and it could literally destroy their future. More often, we're seeing more and more college recruiters, job recruiters looking at kids' digital footprints and then deciding based on what they find there if they're still a good candidate. Because they might look really good on paper, they might be really good in the interview room, but what are they going to find online? What kind of dirt are they going to find on your child? So they need to understand how important their digital footprint is. This is Scott Frost, the Nebraska football coach, and he has a great quote about this. He says, if there's anything negative about women, anything racial or about sexuality, anything about guns or anything like that, we're just not going to recruit you, period. What you put on your internet or what you put on social media is your resume to the world. So I like to hit that point home and just remind them, look, you might think it's funny in the moment, but it's not going to be funny in 5-10 years when it comes back to haunt you. So we'll get to questions here in just a second. I want to answer a few common questions here with this slide. A lot of times parents will ask me, so when should I give my kid a phone? What's the right age for it? And I always like to quote Tom Kirsting. He's the author of Disconnected, good book if you haven't read it. He says, oh, whenever you're comfortable with them viewing pornography. And that's the honest truth, right? It's so easy for our kids to get inappropriate material off of their phones these days. It's almost hard for them not to. You type one wrong letter in the search bar and all of a sudden you're on a site that you never dreamed of seeing, something terrible. So I think that's the best advice there. And I would say just it's up to you. It's up to you, but understand how easy they can get their hands on inappropriate and even dangerous stuff when they're left to their own devices with these devices. Wait Until 8th is a really cool organization because they require groups of at least 10 parents per group. And the reason that's so cool is because a lot of you have experienced this. Our kids tend to be really good at telling us everybody else is doing it. You're so mean. You're the only parent who doesn't let me have a phone. You're the only one who doesn't let me have TikTok. You are the devil. You are just a terrible parent, right? Why can't you be like everybody else's parent? Well, they're trying to work that guilt factor. But when you get in this group, you're going to realize I'm not the only parent because I've got at least 9 other people here on the same page that I'm on. So Wait Until 8th is a good group. 5 and 2 is another thing where, they talk about daily regular detoxes from your digital media. That can be really beneficial. So basically what you want to think about with these questions is, how much do I want to put into this? How willing am I to get into my kid's phone, figure out who they're talking about, what they're talking about? Do I want to put tracking apps on there? Because you certainly can. That's legal to do. Some of them are free, some of them cost money, but you need to be on top of it. And that's a challenge. It's tough because these kids know so much more than us on average about how to work this stuff, but you have to research it. You have to stay up on it, and you have to be active in your child's digital life to make sure that they're safe, because you just saw what we talked about here. We're up against some pretty nasty odds and some pretty scary stuff. So, that's what I've got. Did you want to go ahead and put up your slides? Or we can do questions if you want.
Yeah, actually, why don't we see if there's any questions from any of our attendees? I know that I certainly was reminded of a few things from your presentation, and thank you for being really honest with us and being honest with our children on what is really out there. And we're very lucky to have people like you and Douglas County Sheriff's Office and the Y.E.S.S program teaching this to our kids. So thank you.
Thank you.
One of the things that surprised me is when you said, the question of when is the right time for your child to have a phone? And your answer is, well, when are you ready for them to view pornography? And it's, wow, okay, never thought of it that way. So
yeah.
Thank you for that reminder. But if you'd like to ask questions, feel free to fill out the question and answer box, or you can raise your hand and ask a live question if you have any of them. We do have one question, looks like, and that question is, can you recommend any tracking apps for teens who are driving?
Nothing comes right off the top of my head. I would say just do a little research on it and see what's out there. I will give you a good resource. Remember, I told you our former deputy came up with this whole Y.E.S.S program. So he's left us. He actually retired from the Douglas County Sheriff's Office a couple years ago, and he started a website called dfinow.org. So he still runs these classes. He provides them online, and he has parent resources, he has teacher resources, he has resources for us to teach a lot of the material. So it's Digital Futures Initiative. And I only share this because, I trust them, and I haven't been on there in a bit, but it's basically mirroring what you just learned today with the Y.E.S.S program. Digital Futures Initiative is the name of the site, and dfinow.org, dfinow.org is the website. They have just a plethora of resources as far as tracking apps and what apps your kids are most likely using and how those can be abused and all that information. So he actually went back to teaching. He moved out of state and he's a school teacher again, is the last I heard. And then he also does this website with a couple of tech guys that he had met through this program. So that's going to give you a lot of good information. You can just log in under the parent portal of it. You'll see a little tab for parents. So click on that and you'll find tons of resources on there.
That's great. I did put the website up on our chat, and hopefully anybody looking for references like that can view that information from the website. I'm not seeing any other questions, so unless anyone raises their hand or comes up with any more topics they'd like to address. I know as a parent, sometimes this can be a little bit of an eye opener. So if you're still digesting it, I completely understand. It's a lot to take in. And as you said, fortunately, growing up, everything that we did isn't permanently saved on the internet. Luckily for us. So,
and one more point I'd like to make real quick before I go is just, we're very careful in what we share to whom. So I want you to understand, I don't talk about child prostitution with sixth graders. Okay.
Right.
This is all age appropriate and it's all progressive. So when we talk to sixth graders, obviously it's really watered down, but we do get into predators. We do talk about the fact that you need to be really careful about who you're talking to online and how there's some bad folks out there. And then we also like to share with them at the end, not everybody wants to hurt you. In fact, most people in the world don't want to hurt you. I mean, even after you as parents listening to this presentation, you might walk away thinking, oh my gosh, everyone wants to kill my child. Obviously, that's not the case, right? Most of us in the world are good people, but we like to let them know there are some real monsters out there. And that's why you have to take this stuff seriously, because we don't want you to get hurt by that very small percentage of people that will hurt you if given the chance. And just to kind of give you my background, I've only been with Douglas County Sheriff's Office as a deputy for 8 years. Prior to that, I wasn't in law enforcement. I was actually a mental health counselor. So that's what I went to school for a lot of years. My bachelor's and my master's are both in psychology. So I kind of bring that perspective into this a little bit too, the mental health perspective. And I want to be very careful that what we're sharing with kids is appropriate and it's not going to create more stress. Well, it creates a little bit of stress, but we don't want to traumatize them, obviously. So we're very careful about that, not to trigger them. So.
And on that topic, so specifically, when does the Y.E.S.S program start, in what grade?
Sixth grade.
Sixth grade.
Sixth grade. Okay. Because a lot of our middle schools actually start in sixth grade. So some of our schools, as you know, in Douglas County, some of our elementaries go all the way up through sixth grade, and then they move to middle school in seventh. Whereas some of the elementaries go to fifth grade and they start middle school in sixth grade. So we like to catch them there. We like to catch them when they're exposed to a lot more things in middle school. And then that carries over through eighth grade. And when we get a chance, we also go in and talk to the freshmen in high school. Lately, we haven't had as much time to do that, but I always like to get in there and talk to the freshmen too. And it's really cool to see them. A lot of these kids I've known since sixth grade or even before, and then I see them growing each year and turning into these young adults. It's one of the cool things about what I do.
Definitely. Yeah, it's something, it's always a good reminder for all of us to be safe and to educate ourselves and our kids. So thank you again, Deputy Heidemann. That was a huge amount of resources and information for us. We will be posting this video on our Douglas County Parent University website, as well as anyone who is registered, they will receive this recording as well. I'm going to go ahead and just change add something from my screen real quickly. And let's see, excuse me while I put this out there. Okay, so as for our next Douglas County School District Parent University, it will be presented on November 30th, and topic of teenagers and substance abuse. or substance use, pardon me, marijuana, vaping, dabbing, etc., and mental health and the effects on the teenage brain development. Our special guest will be Laura Stack. She is the author of Dangerous Truth About Today's Marijuana, Johnny Stack's Life and Death Story. So please look for more information on that and that upcoming webinar on through emails from Douglas County, our website, and our social media channels. So that's it for us, I think. Thank you again, Deputy Heidemann. It was so much information, great reminders.
Yeah,
Hope
pleasure.
everyone has a wonderful evening.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.